Disclaimer. The following content is fictional intended solely for entertainment and educational purposes. Any resemblance to real persons or events is purely coincidental. Viewers are advised to verify information independently. New York, May 2025, the federal courtroom in Manhattan simmered with tension. The third day of Calvin Snoop Dogg Broadus's trial, one of the most iconic rappers alive, had drawn a media storm from across the globe. The charges against Snoop's sex trafficking, manipulation of young artists, and running an illicit network hit the entertainment world like a shockwave, threatening to topple the image of a man beloved for his hits and laid-back charisma. No one, not even the most seasoned reporters, could have predicted that today would change everything. Snoop Dogg strode into the courtroom, his navy suit tailored, sharp eyes calm but piercing. At 53, he carried the easy confidence of a hip-hop legend, a faint smile daring the world to test him. He nodded to the gallery where loyal fans squeezed in beside scribbling journalists. His legal team, led by Karen Mitchell, sat poised, passing papers, gazes locked forward. It looked like another day in a high-profile trial until the prosecution stood, their voice cutting through the room like lightning. "Your Honor, we request to present new critical audio evidence," lead prosecutor Daniel Harper said, holding a small black device. The courtroom fell silent, all eyes on him. Karen Mitchell shot up, objecting instantly. "We weren't notified of this evidence," she snapped, her tone sharp. "This is a deliberate ambush," but the judge, Edward Langston, had reviewed the disclosure papers. The evidence was properly submitted, he declared, voice firm as a gavel. "It may be presented." Harper connected the device to a laptop, his gaze flicking to Snoop Dogg, who sat upright, his smile fading. "The court will now hear the final private recording of Tupac Shakur." Harper said, his voice low but heavy as lead. The room froze. Phones dropped to laps. Pens halted. Reporters stopped typing. Snoop tilted his head, a flash of confusion in his eyes, as if asking, "What's this?" Then Harper pressed play. The voice that filled the courtroom wasn't the fiery Tupac of the stage, but a subdued Tupac, his tone hoarse, laced with unease. "I'm making this recording because I don't know who to trust anymore," he began. The sound sent chills through the room, raising goosebumps. This wasn't a performance. It was a confession. In the recording, Tupac said he'd attended private parties allegedly hosted by Snoop Dogg in Miami, Los Angeles, and New York in the 1990s. He described details: young artists separated from their managers, urged to drink and take drugs, locked rooms with hidden cameras and chandeliers, no security allowed inside. The courtroom was silent. Snoop sat motionless, eyes fixed on the defense table, but his fingers tapped faintly as if fighting to stay calm. Tupac went on, his voice heavier. He spoke of a 1995 Los Angeles party where he saw non-disclosure agreements, NDAs handed out, money changing hands, $1 million to one person, $2 million to another. "These ain't parties," Tupac said, his voice trembling slightly. "They're traps." The word traps hit like a blade. A reporter in the back dropped her pen. A spectator covered her mouth, eyes welling. The jury, quietly taking notes the past 2 days, now stared at Snoop Dogg. He remained upright, but his eyes shifted, not fear but wariness, as if calculating. Karen Mitchell placed a hand on his arm, whispering, but Snoop shook his head slightly, eyes glued to the speakers. Tupac continued, his voice calm but cutting. He said he confronted Snoop at a post-Grammy party in 1996, warning him that manipulating young artists had to stop. "I told him, 'Calvin, this gone come back to bite you,'" Tupac recounted. "He laughed and said, 'You might be Pac, but you ain't untouchable. Nobody changes this game.'" That line landed like a gunshot. Snoop's lips tightened, his hands gripping the table's edge. One lawyer scribbled frantically, another glanced at the judge as if awaiting a chance to object. But there was nothing to object to. The evidence spoke for itself. Yet a detail caught some attention. Tupac's voice, though grave, held a hint of hesitation when naming Snoop, as if unsure Snoop was fully behind what he saw. "I don't know who's running it," Tupac said later, "but I saw what I saw and I gotta speak." The recording hadn't finished when Snoop Dogg lost control. As Tupac described a 1996 New York party, detailing a disturbing incident upstairs, a location matching the prosecution's timeline, Snoop stood abruptly, his voice booming. "That's a lie," he shouted, jabbing a finger at the speakers. "I didn't do that." The courtroom erupted. Bailiffs moved forward. Karen yanked his arm, hissing, "Sit down, Calvin." But Snoop pressed on. Pac wasn't there. That never happened. Judge Langston slammed his gavel repeatedly, his voice thunderous. "Mr. Broadus, control yourself, or I'll hold you in contempt." Snoop breathed heavily, sinking back into his seat, but his eyes blazed not with fear, but with fury, as if betrayed. The jury watched some shaking their heads, one visibly shocked. A courtroom sketch artist later told reporters she had to redraw Snoop's face 3 times. His expression shifted from confidence to rage to emptiness. The judge ordered the recording paused, demanding order restored. Snoop sat still, hands trembling slightly on the table, eyes fixed on the floor. The image of the invincible billionaire rapper dissolved, replaced by a man under strain, grappling with something bigger than the trial. Prosecutor Harper, across the room, exchanged glances with his team, a subtle smirk flickering. They'd timed this perfectly. Day 3, when Snoop's confidence peaked. After a 1-hour recess, the judge allowed the recording to resume. The courtroom's mood had shifted. No one whispered, no one typed. Every eye locked on the speakers, as if Tupac's voice from the past commanded the room. Tupac continued, slow and deliberate, as if knowing his words might only be heard if the worst came to pass. "I saw a system," he said. "They make it look glamorous, but I saw it ruin people." He described parties at residences allegedly tied to Snoop, not vaguely, but with chilling detail: room layouts, guest names, the color of sofas in certain lounges. These matched prior testimony from Aaliyah Brooks, a singer who'd worked with Snoop, and 2 anonymous witnesses. What chilled the room was Tupac's mention of NDAs and hush money. "I saw the contracts," he said. $2 million to one guy, 1.5 to another. And I saw what happens to those who try to leave. They don't vanish physically, but musically, socially, they're gone." Snoop sat frozen, his gaze blank, as if locking down his emotions. A lawyer quietly slid him a note, but he didn't take it. Then Tupac dropped another bomb. "I faced him at a Grammy after-party," he said. "I told him straight, 'Calvin, this is gonna catch you.' He said, 'You might be Pac, but I run this game, and folks like you don't change it. They get erased.'" The line roared through the room like thunder. One juror shook her head. Another leaned back, stunned. This wasn't just evidence, it was a character assault delivered by a man no longer alive to be questioned. But amid the accusations, a detail stood out. Tupac mentioned those behind it, suggesting Snoop might not have acted alone. "I ain't sure who's calling the shots," he said, "but I saw the trap and I gotta speak." The recording ended with Tupac's final words: "If something happens to me, make sure this gets to the right people. This ain't about saving me, it's about saving those who never got to speak." The speakers clicked off. Silence engulfed the room. No one clapped. No one murmured. The judge looked at his notes, glanced at the jury, and drew a long breath before proceeding. "The jury must not consider the source's death as evidence of truth or guilt," he said, voice stern. "Evaluate the content and context of the full record." But the jury's eyes told a different story. They weren't just processing evidence, they were feeling it. Snoop sat motionless, almost ghostly, hands on the table. Gaze empty. For the first time in the trial, he didn't look like an untouchable billionaire, but a man facing a storm he couldn't dodge. Harper needed no further words. Tupac had done the heavy lifting from beyond. As the court recessed, Snoop's legal team moved fast. They filed an emergency motion to suppress the recording, arguing its origin couldn't be independently verified. The witness was deceased and couldn't be cross-examined, and it was emotionally prejudicial. But they knew it was too late. The jury had heard it, and worse, they'd seen Snoop break. Karen whispered to him, trying to pull him back, but Snoop only nodded, eyes distant. Outside, the media exploded. Reporters called it unprecedented, a game changer. Legal analysts on live stream said the recording could define the case. But Snoop's biggest worry wasn't this tape, it was what Tupac hinted at. He'd given copies to 3 people with hard drives, tapes, and photos. If more evidence existed, it could ruin not just Snoop, but others in the industry. Yet some began to question. Snoop's reaction, rage, almost desperation, didn't feel like guilt, but betrayal. Why would Tupac, once close to Snoop in the 90s, make this recording? And why mention those behind it? A reporter outside the courthouse muttered to a colleague, "What if Snoop's not the mastermind? What if he's been set up? As court resumed, the atmosphere had shifted. Snoop's lawyers demanded time to review the recording, but the judge denied it, stating the evidence was properly submitted. Harper, eyes sharp, prepared to call the next witness, but everyone knew Tupac's recording had changed the game. Snoop sat quietly, no trace of his smile, eyes fixed on the table. He looked like a man fighting to prove he wasn't the villain the world now saw. But a bigger question loomed: if Snoop Dogg was innocent, as he claimed, who orchestrated these parties, who drove Tupac to make a secret recording, and what really happened in those locked rooms? The trial was no longer just about Snoop. It was about a larger system, and Tupac's recording was only the start of a truth that could topple an empire. The fourth day of Snoop Dogg's trial in Manhattan's federal courthouse dawned heavy, as if Tupac Shakur's recording still echoed through the room. Reporters crammed the back rows, pens scratching furiously, eyes tracking Snoop's every move. He entered a black suit, hugging his frame, his gaze steady but sharp, the defiant smile of earlier days gone. Yesterday's outburst, when he shouted that Tupac lied, had seized the world's attention, but it also shifted the jury's view of him. Snoop knew it. He sat, his eyes flicking to his legal team, murmuring to Karen Mitchell, who nodded, clutching a thick file. Outside, the media frenzy raged. Headlines screamed about the recording as a bombshell shattering Snoop's image, while fans gathered before the courthouse, hoisting signs reading "Snoop is innocent." But inside, the air was colder. Prosecutor Daniel Harper rose, his voice calm yet cutting. "Your Honor, today we'll call Aaliyah Brooks to clarify the allegations tied to the events in Mr. Shakur's recording." Karen Mitchell's brow furrowed, her glance at Snoop seeming to say, "Stay cool." Aaliyah Brooks, a singer who worked with Snoop in the late 2000s, took the witness stand. Around 30, in a simple gray dress, her hair tied low, she avoided Snoop's gaze. Harper began, his tone gentle but pointed. "Ms. Brooks, tell the court about the parties you attended at Mr. Broadus's properties." Aaliyah drew a breath, her voice shaky. "I went to a few in Los Angeles around 2008, 2009. They were lavish with artists, producers. But sometimes things felt off." She described private rooms where some guests, often young artists, were led away. "I saw people drinking heavily, someone offering pills, and I heard about NDAs. I didn't sign, but I saw others do it." Harper leaned in. "Did you see Mr. Broadus directing these activities?" Aaliyah hesitated, her eyes darting to Snoop, then back. "I didn't see him give orders. He was there, and people said they were his parties." The courtroom buzzed. Jurors scribbled, some glancing at Snoop, who sat upright, eyes locked on Aaliyah. Karen stood, her voice crisp but composed. "Ms. Brooks, you said you didn't see Mr. Broadus directing? Is it true you have no evidence he orchestrated these activities?" Aaliyah nodded slowly. "Yes, I didn't see him directly. But people said," Karen cut in. "What people say isn't evidence, Ms. Brooks. Did you see anyone else controlling these parties?" Aaliyah's lips tightened, her eyes flickering. "There was a man, I don't know his name. He was always nearby, giving orders to staff, handing out papers. I think he was in charge." The courtroom stirred. Harper frowned, clearly unprepared for this. Karen pressed on him, voice sharper. "Can you describe this man?" Aaliyah nodded. Tall in a black suit, short hair, always wore sunglasses, even indoors. Karen nodded, returning to her seat, her glance at Snoop, signaling a crack in the case. The court recessed, and Snoop's legal team huddled in a private room. Karen spread files across the table, her voice low but fierce. "This man is the key. If we can prove someone else was behind it, we can turn this case around." Snoop leaned forward, eyes darkening. "I know what they're after," he said, voice rough. "They want me down, but I didn't run no traps." Karen nodded. "We'll find this guy, Calvin. But we need time." Meanwhile, Harper didn't sit idle. He called an anonymous witness, Witness X, whose face was hidden by a screen, voice distorted. They claimed to have handled logistics for Snoop's parties in 2010. "I saw hidden cameras, money changing hands. Young girls led to rooms," they said, voice trembling. Harper asked who ordered this. Witness X hesitated. "I heard it was Snoop, but I didn't see him directly. There was another guy called Shades. He ran everything." Shades landed like a bolt. Jurors murmured, eyes darting to Snoop. Karen leapt up, objecting. "This witness offers no concrete evidence linking Mr. Broadus." "It's hearsay," Judge Langston nodded, but allowed the testimony to continue. Karen sat, her eyes flashing. She knew Shades could save Snoop, but it could also cut both ways if the prosecution dug first. That afternoon, Karen shifted focus to Tupac's recording. She called an audio expert, Dr. Elena Rivera, to testify. Rivera, silver-haired with a steady voice, faced the court. I analyzed the alleged Shakur recording, she said. There are signs of editing splice segments, inconsistent frequencies, and background noise not matching 1990s recording tech. The courtroom hummed. Harper objected, claiming the recording was authenticated, but Rivera shook her head. Authenticating a voice doesn't mean the content wasn't manipulated. Someone could have added or cut parts. Karen leaned in, voice razor sharp. So you're saying this recording may not be reliable? Rivera nodded. Correct. It can't be considered definitive without further investigation. Snoop sat taller, a spark in his eyes for the first time that day, as if glimpsing hope. But Harper didn't relent. He grilled Rivera, trying to prove the recording's credibility, but his questions only highlighted the ambiguity. Jurors jotted notes, their gazes shifting between Snoop and Harper, as if weighing both sides. At the lunch break, the media erupted outside. Headlines blared, Tupac recording, questioned as fake in Snoop Dogg. Victim or villain? Snoop's fans waved signs chanting, "Justice for Snoop." But in the defense's meeting room, the mood was grave. Karen looked at Snoop, voice firm. We've got a shot. If the recording's tampered and this Shades is real, we can prove you were set up. Snoop nodded, eyes shadowed. I don't know who's doing this, Karen, but I know it ain't me running nothing. Karen flipped open an old file, her eyes glinting. We need to find this guy. Do you remember anyone from those parties, someone who could be Shades? Snoop shook his head, voice low. Back then, I was focused on music. I'd show up, vibe, leave. Didn't clock the folks in the background. Karen nodded, but her gaze was resolute. We'll dig deeper. Something's off, and I'm going to find it. That afternoon, Harper called another witness, Marcus Tate, a former artist manager in his 40s, dressed in a gray suit, eyes skittish. Tate said he worked with Snoop in 2007. I saw those parties, he said, voice low. Private rooms, weird contracts. Snoop was always at the center like the boss. Harper nodded, asking, did you see Mr. Broadus ordering these activities? Tate hesitated, eyes flicking to Snoop. Not directly. He was the face, so I assumed. Karen stood, her voice slicing. Assumptions aren't evidence, Mr. Tate. Did you see Mr. Broadus order any illegal acts? Tate shook his head. No, but there was another guy called Shades. He handled everything, cameras, contracts, all of it. The courtroom buzzed again. Harper's frown deepened clearly, not wanting Shades mentioned again. Karen seized the moment. Can you describe Shades? Tate nodded. Tall, black suit, sunglasses, deep voice. Like a shadow, always close, but quiet. Judge Langston called for order, but the mood had shifted. Jurors exchanged glances, some scribbling faster. Snoop sat still, his eyes on Tate, as if trying to recall something. Harper tried to regain control, questioning Tate about other parties, but Tate's answers only amplified. Shades making the prosecutor seem off balance. As court adjourned, Karen and Snoop regrouped. We've got traction, she said, voice steady. If Shades is real, he could be the one behind it all. And if the recording's doctored, we can flip this case. Snoop nodded, but his eyes darkened. I don't know who's pulling this, Karen, but it ain't me they're after. Karen rested a hand on his shoulder. We'll find out, I promise. Outside, a reporter received an anonymous envelope containing a note. Check Tupac's archive. There's more than the recording. No signature, no trace, but the note was a spark igniting whispers that a bigger truth lurked. In the courtroom, Snoop stared out a window, his gaze steely. He knew this trial wasn't just about him, it was about a larger plot, and he had to fight to prove his innocence before the storm swallowed everything. The fifth morning of Snoop Dogg's trial in Manhattan's federal courthouse opened with a stifling tension, as if the whispers of Shades and the anonymous envelope still hung in the air. Reporters packed the back rows, cameras flashing, eyes tracking Snoop as he entered. His gray suit fit sharply, his demeanor calm, but his gaze steely glinting with new resolve. The fiery outburst 2 days ago had made the jury see him as a man cornered, but today he looked ready to fight. He sat exchanging a brief word with Karen Mitchell, who placed a thick file before her, her eyes sparking with fresh confidence. Karen knew her team stood at a turning point. Testimony about shades from Aaliyah Brooks and Marcus Tate, coupled with doubts about the authenticity of Tupac's recording, had cracked the prosecution's case. The anonymous note checked Tupac's archive was a flare urging her to dig deeper. She'd tasked a private investigator, Lena Carter, with chasing any lead on the archive or shades. But in the courtroom, she faced Daniel Harper, who had no intention of letting Snoop slip away. Harper rose, his voice ringing out, steady but sharp. "Your Honor, today we call James Jimmy Wallace to clarify Mr. Broadus's role in the alleged illegal activities." Karen's brow furrowed, her glance at Snoop met with a slight headshake, as if he didn't know Wallace. The jury sat up, pens poised, their eyes shifting between Harper and Snoop. James Wallace, a former music producer in his 50s, took the stand. Dressed in a worn brown jacket, his salt and pepper hair unkempt, he avoided eye contact. Harper began, his tone gentle but guiding. "Mr. Wallace, tell the court about your relationship with Mr. Broadus and what you saw at his parties." Wallace cleared his throat, his voice low, wavering. "I worked with Snoop in the early 2000s, produced a few tracks for him. I got invited to parties in Miami and LA. They weren't normal." He described a chaotic scene young artists led to private rooms. NDAs handed out, large sums of money exchanged. "I saw hidden cameras, saw people pressured to sign papers," he said. Harper leaned in. "Who ran these activities?" Wallace hesitated, his eyes flicking to Snoop. "People said it was Snoop. He was the face of the parties. But there was another guy called Shades. He gave the orders." Shades hit the courtroom like a jolt. Jurors murmured, their gazes darting to Snoop, who sat still, but his fingers tapped the table faintly, as if anchoring himself. Karen stood, her voice crisp yet composed. "Mr. Wallace, you said people said about Mr. Broadus. Did you see him directly order any illegal acts?" Wallace shook his head. "No, I didn't see that. But he was there, so I thought," Karen cut in, her tone firmer. "Thinking isn't evidence, Mr. Wallace. Can you describe Shades?" Wallace nodded. Tall black suit, sunglasses, deep voice. Like a shadow, always nearby, but running the show. Karen nodded, returning to her seat, her glance at Snoop, signaling another piece of the puzzle falling into place. The court recessed, and Snoop's legal team huddled in a private room. Karen spread files across the table, her voice low but fierce. 3 witnesses mentioned Shades. "He's the key. If we find him, we can prove you were set up." Snoop leaned forward, eyes darkening. "Karen, I don't know this dude. Those parties, I was there for the music, the vibe, then I'd bounce. I didn't clock the guys in the back." Karen nodded, her gaze burning. "Lena's checking Tupac's archive. If there's anything there, we'll find it." Meanwhile, Lena Carter, the private investigator, had contacted a former manager of Tupac's, who revealed that Tupac kept a secret archive, hard drives, cassettes, notes in a Los Angeles safe. "He knew he was being watched," the manager said. "He left everything to 3 people, but I don't know who." Lena sent Karen a report flagging a troubling detail. Some archive materials were stolen in 1997, shortly after Tupac's death. This raised suspicions that the recording might have been tampered with by someone with access. Back in court, Harper called another witness, Malik Jones, a former security worker. Broad-shouldered in a green shirt, his eyes hard. Jones said he worked at Snoop's parties in 2009. "I saw private rooms, young girls led away, money handed out," he said, voice steady. Harper asked, "Who ordered this?" Jones answered quickly. "I didn't see Snoop give orders. There was another guy called Shades. He ran everything, cameras, contracts, security." Shades struck a 4th time, electrifying the courtroom. Harper's frown deepened clearly, not wanting this figure highlighted again. Karen stood, her voice slicing. "Mr. Jones, you said you didn't see Mr. Broadus give orders. Is it true you have no evidence he directed illegal activities?" Jones nodded. "Right. I only saw Shades and his crew." Karen pressed on. "Can you describe Shades?" Jones nodded. Tall black suit, sunglasses, low voice. He was the real boss. Judge Langston called for order, but the mood had shifted. Jurors exchanged glances, some scribbling faster. Snoop sat still, his eyes on Jones, as if trying to summon a memory. Harper tried to steer back, questioning Jones on other details, But Jones's answers only amplified shades, making the prosecutor seem unsteady. That afternoon, Karen called a surprise witness, Dr. Marcus Lee, an audio technology expert, for a deeper analysis of Tupac's recording. Lee, short-haired with a confident voice, faced the court. "I examined the alleged Shakur recording," he said. "There's clear evidence of editing digitally spliced segments, inconsistent background noise, and words showing signs of modern software insertion." The courtroom hummed. Harper objected, claiming the recording was authenticated, but Lee shook his head. "Authenticating a voice doesn't mean the content's original. Someone could have manipulated it to target Mr. Broadus." Karen leaned in voice razor sharp. "So you're saying this recording could be falsified?" Lee nodded. "Not entirely fake, but definitely altered. It's unreliable as primary evidence without further scrutiny." Snoop sat taller, a flicker of hope in his eyes, but he stayed silent, hands gripping the table's edge. Harper grilled Lee, trying to undermine his findings, but his questions only underscored the ambiguity. Jurors took notes, their gazes wavering as if pondering a larger plot. As court broke, the media outside ignited. Headlines roared, "Tupac recording possibly fake," and "Snoop Dogg frames Snoop's fans" swelled, chanting, "Free Snoop." In the defense's meeting room, Karen faced Snoop, voice resolute. "We're getting closer. If Shades is real and the recording's been tampered with, we can prove you were targeted." Snoop nodded, voice low. "Karen, I don't know who's behind this, but I know it ain't me they're painting." Karen flipped open Lena's report, eyes gleaming. Lena found a witness, an old Tupac associate. He says Tupac suspected a group in the industry was behind those parties, not just one guy. "We need to find them?" Snoop leaned in, eyes shadowed. "Pac always talked about folks pulling strings." "I didn't listen, but now, maybe he was right." Late that day, a reporter received an anonymous email. "Find the manager of Tupac's 1997 archive. He knows who took the materials." No name, no trace, but the message was a spark fueling whispers that a deeper truth hid in the shadows, waiting to be uncovered. In the courtroom, Snoop stood, his gaze icy, staring out a window. He knew this trial wasn't just about him, it was about a larger machine, and he had to fight to prove his innocence before the darkness swallowed everything. The seventh day of Snoop Dogg's trial in Manhattan's federal courthouse crackled with tension, as if the clues about Shades and the anonymous email still smoldered in the air. Reporters jammed the gallery cameras, flashing eyes locked on Snoop as he entered. His sleek black suit hugged his frame, his movement steady, but his gaze was icy, burning with unyielding resolve. Days earlier, he'd been pushed to the edge by Tupac's recording, but today he looked like a man ready to flip the game. He sat exchanging a quick word with Karen Mitchell, who set a fresh stack of files before her eyes glinting with sharp confidence. Karen knew her team stood at a crossroads. The consistent mentions of Shades by witnesses, paired with doubts about the recording's authenticity, had fractured the prosecution's case. The anonymous email, "Find the manager of Tupac's 1997 archive," was a lightning bolt, spurring her and private investigator Lena Carter to dig deeper. Lena had uncovered a name, Vincent Russo, a former music executive, matching Shades' description. But in the courtroom, Karen faced Daniel Harper, a prosecutor determined to keep Snoop pinned. Harper stood, his voice clear and forceful. "Your Honor, today will present further evidence tying Mr. Broadus to the illicit activities described by prior witnesses." Karen's eyes narrowed, flicking to Snoop, who gave a subtle nod, signaling he was ready. The jury sat upright, pens ready, their gazes shifting between Harper and Snoop, sensing the day's weight. Harper called Vanessa Reed, a former event planner in her late 40s who'd worked for Snoop in the early 2000s. Dressed in a navy blazer, her auburn hair tied back, she took the stand, hands twisting nervously. Harper began, his tone calm but probing. "Ms. Reed, describe your role in Mr. Broadus's events and what you saw." Vanessa cleared her throat, her voice even, but strained. "I planned parties for Snoop in Miami, in New York, big events with artists, execs. But some things felt wrong." She spoke of private rooms where young guests were escorted, NDAs distributed, and cash swapped in hushed deals. "I saw cameras hidden in fixtures, heard about payoffs," she said. Harper leaned in. "Who was behind these activities?" Vanessa hesitated, her eyes darting to Snoop. "Everyone said Snoop ran it. He was the face of the parties. But there was another guy called Shades. He gave the orders. Shades landed like a spark. Jurors murmured, their eyes flicking to Snoop, who sat motionless though his fingers twitched, as if wrestling a memory. Karen rose, her voice crisp yet composed. "Ms. Reed, you said everyone said about Mr. Broadus. Did you see him directly order any illegal acts?" Vanessa shook her head. "No, I didn't. He was there, so I assumed." Karen cut him firm. "Assumptions aren't evidence, Miss Reed. Can you describe Shades?" Vanessa nodded. Tall black suit, sunglasses, indoors, deep voice. Like a ghost, always near but running things. Karen sat her glance at Snoop, signaling another piece locking in. The courtroom buzzed, jurors scribbling, some frowning, as if questioning Harper's narrative. Harper's jaw tightened, visibly irked that Shades kept surfacing, clouding his case. During a recess, Snoop's legal team huddled in a private room. Karen spread files across the table, her voice low but urgent. 4 witnesses now name Shades. He's no coincidence, he's the linchpin. If we find Russo, we prove you were framed. Snoop leaned back, eyes shadowed. Karen, I don't know this guy. Those parties, I was there for the music, the vibe, then I'd leave. Didn't notice some dude in Shades calling shots. Karen nodded, her gaze fierce. Lena's closing in on Russo. If he's Shades, we'll turn this around. Meanwhile, Lena had dug deeper in Los Angeles, contacting a former Tupac associate who confirmed the archive's existence, a safe deposit box holding drives, cassettes, and journals. Pac knew he was being watched, the associate said. He left everything to 3 people, but I don't know who. Some of it was stolen in '97, right after he died. Lena's report to Karen included a bombshell. A 1997 police log documented a break-in at a storage unit linked to Tupac, with missing items never recovered. It fueled suspicions that the recording was tampered with by someone with access. Back in court, Harper called another witness, Darius D. Coleman, a former promoter in his 30s who'd worked with Snoop in 2011. Flashy in a loud jacket, Coleman spoke with smooth confidence. "I saw the party's locked rooms, deals made, girls taken upstairs," he said, voice slick. Harper asked who ran these events. Coleman pointed at Snoop. Snoop was the man. His name was on everything. Harper nodded, satisfied, but Karen was primed. She stood, her voice like a blade. "Mr. Coleman, did you see Mr. Broadus order any illegal acts?" Coleman shrugged. "Not exactly, but he was the boss." So Karen interrupted sharp. "Not exactly isn't evidence. Did you see anyone else directing these activities?" Coleman hesitated, then nodded. "Yeah, a guy called Shades. Tall sunglasses, black suit. He ran the show, told everyone what to do." The courtroom stirred again, jurors leaning forward, pens racing. Harper's face stiffened, his control slipping as Shades resurfaced. Karen pressed to describe Shades further. Coleman complied. Deep voice, always calm, like he owned the place. Didn't talk to Snoop much, just gave orders. Karen sat, her eyes meeting Snoop's, a silent signal they were closing in. Judge Langston called for order, but the shift was clear, the jury's doubt now extended to Harper. That afternoon, Karen made a bold move, calling Lena Carter to the stand. Lena, wiry and no-nonsense, testified with steady conviction. "I traced Mr. Shakur's archive to a Los Angeles safe deposit box," she said. "It contained drives, cassettes, and notes, but some were stolen in 1997, per a police report I uncovered." She held up a faded document. The theft occurred months after Mr. Shakur's death, targeting his private materials. Karen stepped forward, voice firm. "What does this suggest about the recording played in court?" Lena replied. "It's possible the recording was accessed and altered by someone aiming to frame Mr. Broadus. The stolen materials could include originals used to craft a doctored version." The courtroom hummed. Harper objected, calling it speculation, but Langston allowed it, noting its relevance. Jurors scribbled, one frowning as if piecing together a puzzle. Harper countered, calling a forensic audio analyst, Dr. Rachel Kim, to defend the recording's authenticity. Kim, poised and clinical, said, "The voice is undeniably Mr. Shakur's, verified by spectral analysis." But Karen was ready. "Dr. Kim, can you confirm the content wasn't edited?" Kim hesitated. "There are minor inconsistencies, but nothing conclusive." Karen pounced. "So you can't rule out manipulation?" Kim admitted. "Not entirely. The admission landed heavily, jurors exchanging glances, their trust in the recording wavering. As court recessed, the media outside exploded. Headlines roared: Tupac's tape, tainted, and Snoop Dogg, framed by mystery man. Snoop's fans grew louder, chanting, "Justice for Snoop." In the defense's meeting room, Karen faced Snoop, her voice electric. "We're close, Calvin. Lena's tracking the 1997 theft. If we find who took Tupac's materials, we tie it to Shades." Snoop nodded, jaw tight. Karen, "I don't know who's pulling this, but they're playing dirty. Pac was my brother. He wouldn't do me like this." Karen opened Lena's latest report, eyes widening. Lena found a name: Vincent Russo, a former music exec matching Shades. He was linked to a 1997 investigation, but never charged. Snoop leaned in, eyes narrowing. "Russo, I remember that name. He was always around, quiet, watching. Thought he was just some suit." Karen's gaze hardened. "If he's Shades, he could be the one setting you up. We need to find him." That evening, Lena uncovered another lead, a retired detective who'd worked the 1997 break-in. He claimed Russo was tied to a powerful industry figure, known only as the Broker, a mogul who controlled artists through blackmail and payoffs. The detective's tip was vague but chilling. Russo wasn't solo. The Broker wanted Tupac's archive to bury evidence or weaponize it later. Lena sent the report to Karen, who read it with a racing pulse. The pieces were aligning, but time was tight. The next day, Harper, sensing the case slipping, pushed harder, presenting emails allegedly from Snoop to party organizers, mentioning NDAs and special guests. But Karen struck back fast. She called a cybersecurity expert, Jamal Hayes, who testified the emails showed tampering off timestamps, metadata, inconsistent with Snoop's devices. "These could have been fabricated," Hayes said, shaking Harper's case further. Jurors took notes, one tilting her head as if seeing Snoop differently. As the day closed, a bombshell landed. Lena slipped into the defense's room, her face taut. "I found Russo," she whispered, handing Karen a photo. It showed a tall man in a black suit, sunglasses, at a 1990s industry event, his deep voice noted in old interviews. But the real shock was a second photo. Russo beside a shadowy industry titan Lena suspected was the Broker. Karen gripped the images, eyes blazing. "This is it," she said, voice trembling with excitement. "If we link Russo to the Broker, we prove Snoop was framed." Snoop stared at the photos, his gaze darkening. "They want me gone, but I ain't letting them win," he said, voice low. Karen placed a hand on his shoulder. "We'll find the Broker, Calvin, and we'll expose this." Outside, a reporter received another anonymous message. Russo wasn't alone. "Find the Broker." No name, no trace, but the message was aflame, igniting a sense that the truth was near, poised to erupt in the days ahead. In the courtroom, Snoop stood, his gaze cold, staring out a window. He knew this trial wasn't just about him, it was about a darker web, and he stood on the brink of proving his innocence, yet faced a greater danger than ever. The 8th day of Snoop Dogg's trial in Manhattan's federal courthouse dawned with the weight of a storm about to break. Reporters crammed the gallery, their eyes sharp, cameras flashing as if the world held its breath for a defining moment. Snoop entered, his navy suit sharp, his gaze calm but blazing with resolve. Days earlier, he'd been cornered by Tupac's recording and a barrage of accusations, but today he stood tall, a man who knew he was close to shattering the chains around him. He sat, his eyes locking with Karen Mitchell's, who placed a slim but heavy file before her gaze alight with fierce confidence, like a warrior poised for the final strike. Karen knew this was their last shot. The photos of Vincent Russo, identified as Shades, and the lead on the Broker, a shadowy industry titan, had carved a path to clear Snoop's name. Lena Carter, her private investigator, had worked tirelessly chasing Tupac's archive and evidence tying Russo to the Broker. But in the courtroom, Karen faced Daniel Harper, the prosecutor clinging to his crumbling case, determined to keep Snoop pinned, despite the cracks in his arguments. Harper stood, his voice steady but strained. "Your Honor, today will reinforce evidence of Mr. Broadus's role in the illicit activities through additional testimony and verified documents." Karen's eyes narrowed, flicking to Snoop, who gave a faint nod as if to say, "Let them try." The jury sat, rigid, pens ready, their gazes wavering between Harper and Snoop, sensing the day would decide everything. Harper called Carla Evans, a former production assistant in her mid-30s who'd worked for Snoop in 2012. In a simple black dress, her hair tied high, she took the stand, her eyes nervous but resolute. Harper began, his tone soft but guiding. "Ms. Evans, tell the court what you saw at Mr. Broadus's events." Carla drew a breath, her voice even but tense. "I helped organize a few parties in Los Angeles and Miami. They were glamorous, but there were private rooms where young guests were taken. I saw NDAs, saw cash handed out." Harper leaned in. "Who controlled these activities?" Carla hesitated, her eyes darting to Snoop. "People said Snoop was in charge. He was the center of the parties. But there was another man called Shades. He gave the orders." Shades cut through the room like a chill. Jurors murmured, their eyes flicking to Snoop, who sat still, though his fingers clenched briefly as if bracing a surge of emotion. Karen rose, her voice crisp yet composed. "Ms. Evans, you said, people said about Mr. Broadus. Did you see him directly order any illegal acts?" Carla shook her head. "No, I didn't. He was there, so I thought," Karen interrupted firm. "Thinking is in evidence, Ms. Evans. Can you describe Shades?" Carla nodded. Tall black suit, sunglasses, deep voice. "He was like a shadow, always near, running everything." Karen sat, her glance at Snoop, signaling another brick in their defense. The courtroom buzzed, jurors scribbling, some exchanging looks as if doubting Harper's case. During a recess, Snoop's legal team huddled in a private room. Karen spread files across the table, her voice low but electric. "5 witnesses named Shades. Russo's our guy, and if we tie him to the broker, we'll break this case wide open." Snoop leaned back, eyes shadowed. "Karen, I don't know Russo beyond his name. Those parties I showed up for the music, the vibe, then left. Didn't see the suits in the back." Karen nodded, her gaze blazing. "Lena's got Russo. If we prove the broker's behind this, you're clear." Meanwhile, Lena had dug deeper, contacting a former employee of a record label tied to Tupac. The source revealed Vincent Russo was a fixer for a figure known as the Broker, who manipulated artists with blackmail and hush money and was linked to the 1997 theft of Tupac's archive. Lena found a critical document, a 1996 NDA signed by a young artist bearing Russo's signature, and a faint name tied to the Broker. She sent it to Karen with a note. "The Broker may be a top exec at a major label, but the identity's still unclear." Back in court, Harper tried to shore up his case, presenting a 2010 party video, showing Snoop in the crowd laughing as a private room opened in the background. "Mr. Broadus was central to these events," Harper said, voice firm. But Karen struck back fast, calling a video analyst, Dr. Sarah Nguyen, who proved the footage was doctored, the private room scene was spliced in, misaligned with the original shot. "This video shows signs of tampering," Nguyen said, further eroding Harper's case. Jurors jotted notes, one tilting her head as if seeing Snoop anew. That afternoon, Karen unleashed her decisive blow, recalling Lena Carter to the stand. Lena, steely and direct, spoke with unwavering clarity. "I traced Vincent Russo, a former music exec, matching the Shades description. From witnesses," she said, holding up Russo's 1996 event photo, black suit, sunglasses, standing beside a figure suspected to be the Broker. "Russo was linked to the 1997 theft of Mr. Shakur's archive, and I found a 1996 NDA signed by Russo and a name tied to a senior label executive." The courtroom stirred. Harper objected, calling it speculation, but Langston allowed it, noting its relevance. Karen stepped forward, voice ringing. "Ms. Carter, what does this suggest about the charges against Mr. Broadus?" Lena replied, "Russo and likely the Broker orchestrated events to frame Mr. Broadus, using stolen materials from Mr. Shakur to create false evidence." The jury sat, frozen pens, still, their eyes darting between Snoop and Harper. Harper countered, calling a final witness, Michael "Mike" Lawson, a 2005 event manager. Short in a gray suit, Lawson said he saw Snoop at parties where strange things happened. But under Karen's cross-examination, he admitted never seeing Snoop give orders and named Shades as the true director. Harper's jaw tightened, his case unraveling as Shades surfaced again. As court recessed, the media outside erupted. Headlines screamed, "Snoop Dogg cleared," and "Who is the Broker?" Snoop's fans roared, waving signs for justice. In the defense's meeting room, Karen hugged Snoop, her voice thick. "We did it, Calvin." Snoop nodded, eyes shining but heavy. "Pac tried to warn us. I just want the truth out." The final day, Karen called her last witness, Emily Chen Russo's former assistant. Petite in her 30s with steady eyes, Chen spoke clearly. I worked for Vincent Russo in 2000. He ran parties for someone called The Broker, a top label exec. They framed artists, filmed them, secretly used NDAs to silence them. Russo said Snoop was a target because he wouldn't play along. The courtroom went still, the air sucked out. Jurors stared, one covering her mouth, eyes wide. Harper objected, calling it unverified, but Karen presented the 1996 NDA from Tupac's archive, bearing Russo's signature and a mark linked to The Broker. This is proof, she said, voice resounding. Mr. Broadus was targeted to conceal a larger system. Langston nodded, admitting the evidence. Harper sat, his gaze blank, as if knowing he'd lost. When the jury returned, their verdict rang out, not guilty. The courtroom exploded in applause. Snoop stood embracing Karen, his eyes bright, but tinged with sorrow. He knew this victory wasn't just for him, it sparked a new fight. Outside, he faced the press, voice low. I fought not just for me, but for those buried by this system. The truth's still coming. Lena in the shadows pursued one last lead, a document from Tupac's archive naming The Broker. She sent it to Karen with a note. This is just the start. Snoop stood before the courthouse, Manhattan's sunset glowing behind him. He knew he'd won, but the darkness hadn't lifted. He hoped his story would inspire young artists, the voiceless, to know that truth, though buried, always finds the light.